Police Squad. You ever watch Police Squad?
Oh, it's
Police
amazing.
Squad in colour. At the end, they used to have a freeze, didn't they? So, as the credits were playing.
Yeah, and that was before everyone else had done that.
That's right. And there was
really funny.
There was one when someone was pouring coffee, and it just kept pouring and pouring out of the side of the mug. It's just brilliant.
Yeah, they don't make them like they used to.
Yeah, it's classy. Classy.
All right, shall we go?
Let's go.
I'm a bit nervous.
Really?
Yeah, that's okay.
Okay. Do you need the toilet before we start?
No, thanks. I'll go during.
Oh, okay. Ruprecht style.
Hello, and welcome to The Good Robot Andes, Season 3, Episode 10.
Wow. Episode 10.
My name is Andy Badham, and this is...
Andy Cockerill.
And tonight, we're going to do something a little bit different. Andy, would you like to explain a bit what we're doing?
Yeah, okay. So we were discussing today, before we started recording, that with there being so much bleakness and kind of things to complain about and things to get hot under the collar about, particularly for two white liberal men like us, who really can't bring anything new to the conversation apart from, isn't everything terrible? Rather than just come on to a podcast and say, isn't everything terrible, in common with lots of other podcasts, we thought we'd pick out a couple of news stories or things that have struck us as being rather uplifting, that sort of give you hope for humanity. And that's what we're going to do first on the podcast, is talk about two things that are pretty awesome, really. So, Andy, do you want to go first? Because you picked out something.
I thought I'd just introduce first the fact that I'm in an incredibly positive mood for three main reasons. Number one, I have a cup of coffee here that I'm drinking, which is brewed by grinding the beans in the machine with the machine I got for my birthday.
Ooh.
Which is truly delicious. Number two, I have in a little jar next to my desk some chocolate.
Ooh, that looks nice.
Which I can safely eat without making myself ill.
Oh, how so? What's interesting about this chocolate?
Well, that leads me into point number three, which is that I've discovered over the last couple of years that most foods make me feel ill, and I believe I finally figured out what those things are.
Okay. And
today was the first day for several months where I haven't had stomachache, basically.
That's very good.
So I feel really good.
And what is
One of the things I couldn't eat was chocolate. But it turns out that's because chocolate usually has glucose syrup in it, or soya lecithins in it.
Yes, yeah.
And both those things appear to cause me trouble. It appears that anything that's ever been near wheat in any form, because glucose syrup is normally made with wheat, even though they don't say that in the ingredients.
Right.
Makes me feel really awful. But I had a test, and I don't have celiac disease.
But you are intolerant to wheat.
I certainly seem to be. It makes me feel very ill.
Yeah.
So, point is, I feel really great.
Excellent.
So today seems a suitable day to talk about some positive things.
Excellent, okay.
So one thing that we want to talk about is a couple of days ago I watched a film called Overview, which I actually got turned onto by the Liturgists podcast, a very interesting podcast.
Okay.
Existential, sort of Christian-y, but mostly existential podcast. And they interviewed the bloke who made this film. And this film is called Overview. It's about this thing called the overview effect. I believe you watched it, Andy.
I did, in fact. And do you want me to say what it's about?
Do a bit of a summary, because that's our format, isn't it?
Okay, a bit of a summary. So Overview is about a film it interviews astronauts who have been into space and then look back at the Earth and been struck by how beautiful it is, but also how fragile the Earth looks from outer space.
And how it looks like a living being.
Yes, and
or rather, how it is a living being, and you can only see it from that distance.
Yeah, and they, when they look down on it, they see it as a living entity, rather than when we're on planet Earth and we're in our local area and we don't really see the thing as a whole. Astronauts look back on it and think it looks really fragile. There's this tiny, tiny, thin bit of atmosphere that's protecting us from the black coldness of space. And they start to see how the Earth everything is interconnected. And it makes them, it's quite a profound thing that happens to people looking back on the Earth.
Said that the bloke who was being interviewed said that for some astronauts, this is just a kind of a sort of beautiful sight. But for a lot of them, this is a profound experience of the kind that you might describe as like a peak experience or a spiritual experience.
Yeah, or a life-changing experience, yeah, for sure.
And the experience, the sort of the action they want to take when they've had this experience is they want to work together with everyone in the world. Having seen that we're all being transported on this spaceship
Earth,
called the Earth.
Yes, yeah. Right.
Through the sort of bleak blackness of space. And especially having seen, just in terms of our survival as a species, having seen how paper thin the atmosphere is that wraps around the world. And they talked about the idea that when you're on the Earth and you look up in the sky looks infinite.
Yeah.
And when you're in space and you look from space,
you look down on the Earth.
The actual atmosphere, if you look at the edge, at the horizon, is almost invisibly small.
Yeah.
It's so much smaller than the kind of rock that is the Earth.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about how deep the deepest part of the ocean is, the atmosphere is tiny compared to that. Really tiny.
Yeah, and so when you see pictures of the Earth from space, you see something that you think is the edge of the atmosphere, and apparently that's not. It's something like the ionosphere or something that's there's no air there. So the bit that is actually the air we breathe, you basically can't see. It's like a haze that's so close to the surface.
Yes.
That you basically can't see it. So it's shocking, and it helps you realise how 7.5 billion of us might have an effect on the climate in a way that you might not appreciate when you're looking up and it looks infinite.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But of course, the infinity you're seeing is the infinity of space that's been coloured blue by a very thin layer of atmosphere.
That's right. Yeah.
And most of that feeling of infinity is actually empty space, not the air.
Our little blue planet. Which to an observer, if aliens could see our planet, as we look at planets from exoplanets using the Kepler telescope, if aliens had the same technology or similar technology, they would see that our planet was mostly water and think, it's probably not worth bothering with. Or they might think, well, it's got water, it's got gas as well. So actually, it's there's probably some life there.
Yeah, I mean, having liquid water,
seems,
or having liquid water on the surface seems
pretty. It's a
rare.
a prerequisite for life. It's rare.
Well, we don't know that. It might, but it certainly seems a good conditions for life.
I think,
anyway.
Given the abundance of oxygen and hydrogen in the universe, life is surely inevitable rather than random, and it must exist somewhere else.
You mean just because there's so many planets?
Yeah, there's so many planets, and there's
or
such
just because we can't be.
Yeah,
we just can't be that big a coincidence.
No, exactly. Yeah.
Maybe we can.
Maybe we can.
Or maybe
we can.
Maybe there's been billions and billions of species, but they've all died out before they met the next one.
Well, yeah, we're in the sort of middle age of the universe now, so there may well have been many societies existed before us. Yeah, that are now long dead.
So one of the things that the bloke talked about in the interview that I heard on the Liturgists podcast, that they didn't talk about in the film, was, well, what they did talk about in the film was that this feeling when you look at the Earth that it looks like an organism. The way it moves, it's constantly moving and very, very beautiful, and it looks like an organism. So they talked about that, and that's an idea that we've heard before. There's the Gaia hypothesis that Earth is a sort of self-sustaining system that you could essentially think of as an organism. But what they talked about a little bit on this podcast was the idea that if some outside observer were watching this Earth organism, then when the space missions went to the moon, that was sort of a unique event that had never happened before, that part of this organism, part of this life that existed on Earth, sort of broke off and moved much further away from the Earth's surface than it had previously. And then it looked back and took this famous photo called the Earthrise photo.
Yeah, that's right.
So in some sense, that organism, which is our Earth, that was the first time it looked at itself.
Yes.
In some sense.
Yes.
And that it there is the possibility for life, not just humans, but that the life that is Earth, to reach another level of being through this ability to see itself. Not through, like this sort of profound aesthetic experience is important, but I'm sure there are other ways of achieving the same kind of transcendence and understanding that we're all one.
I think the photo from the moon is really important in that it shows us that we're not actually that big, because you only have to get to the moon to realise that the Earth isn't that big.
Yeah.
And then more recently we've had the photo from the Cassini spacecraft that was taken through the rings of Saturn.
Yeah, I heard about that. It sounds amazing.
And there's a tiny blue dot with an arrow saying, "You are here." Which is truly, it's just amazing. That really does throw it into perspective.
There's something about seeing that.
Yeah.
That helps us understand it more than just knowing that.
I think so, and I think that a lot of I'm going to go off a bit philosophical now and a bit wishy-washy, but I think a lot of the sort of injustice and extremism and people who hold extreme views about things, if they could be taken into space and shown the Earth from space, that they might come back a changed people.
And kicked out of the airlock.
You said it, I didn't.
Do you want to talk about the other thing that you were going to talk about?
Yeah, I do.
But then I have some thoughts.
But just briefly.
Yeah.
At the just as a bit of trivia, because I do like a bit of trivia. On the ISS, they have all the astronauts who are going to do spacewalks, or in fact, people who just have an allocated task. They are allowed what's known as oar time, which is because when you as they address in that film overview, when you pass a window on the ISS, you just can't help but look out at the Earth, and because it's constantly changing, there's a lot to see. So each task or spacewalk task has built-in oar time, which is just, oh, look at that.
That is awesome.
That's really awesome. Yeah. There we are.
It sounds pretty beautiful, and it's quite exciting that it potentially technology might mean that more people have that experience.
Yeah, I think so. I think if I suppose if Richard Branson ever gets his reusable spacecraft thing, that isn't actually a spacecraft, is it? I think it's just going to fly in the very upper atmosphere.
Is that right?
I think so. If that ever happens, what's it called? Virgin Galaxy? It's awfully
Virgin Galactic.
Galactic. It's awfully grandiose anyway, whatever it is. If that ever gets off the ground, the only
Virgin low orbit.
the only people who are going to be able to do it are very rich people.
Yeah, but having the very rich people have the overview effect active in there might be quite helpful.
So you imagine if Rupert Murdoch went up there, he'd be like, "Oh, blimey, I don't want to be such a horrible person anymore."
Yeah, I think that's how it works.
Excellent. Okay. Well, then he should pay for a ticket. I mean, he's probably one of the first customers anyway. Okay, so the thing that I wanted to talk about is a thing that appeared in my Twitter feed this week, which was a very welcome story given all the other stuff that's been appearing in my feed for the last few weeks. And this is a story based in India about an environmental activist named Jadav Payeng, who has seen his local environment, so the forest where he lives, has been slowly, basically decimated for agriculture, and to the point where there's hardly anything left. So to try and mitigate this, for the last 37 years, every day, he's been planting a tree in this area.
37 years is a long time.
It's a long time, yeah. I mean, it shows you how long this kind of deforestation has been going on for, and how it's getting worse. It's not getting any better. There's areas we know about the Amazon being deforested, but also areas of places like Indonesia that have been deforested, and Madagascar as well. So anyway, for the last 37 years, he's planted a tree every single, did I say day or year? Day, yeah.
Yeah.
And because of this, he's created a forest. It's not just because he's been planting a tree every day, but because these trees grow pretty quickly. They seed themselves, and they in turn encourage other plants and animals to come into the forest, and they spread the seeds, and before you know it, you've got a fully grown forest. And this has encouraged animals to return to the area that had left because it had been deforested. So things like
awesome
forest elephants, rhinos, tigers, endangered stuff has returned to this area. And it's just an incredible story of someone who stood up and said, "No, I'm not really going to put up with this, and I'm going to do something about it." And I was really struck by his calm fortitude, because you might have the idea to do this, but you might give up after day 2 and think, "No, I'm just going to go and do something else." But he's just kept on with it.
Yeah, it seems hopeless.
Yeah, but there is hope. There is hope, and that really struck a chord with me. I thought that, it made me think that there is hope if you want to do something about it.
Yeah, and I feel like there's hope. I actually feel more optimistic about climate change specifically than about the human race, if you see what I mean, the one-ness of all people. So I kind of feel like I mean we absolutely need urgent action to stop climate change, but I feel like it's the kind of problem that we can approach in multiple ways. So we can approach by reducing consumption and by getting energy in different ways. We can also approach it by technology. We can remove gases from the atmosphere and so on and so on. And I understand that that's quite difficult, but if we put our minds to it, we might get somewhere with it.
Yeah, it is difficult, but so is the process of taking crude oil and turning it into petrol.
Yeah,
that's difficult.
We've managed that.
Yeah. We've perfected it. So we can do many other things. We just need to apply minds to it.
So, and I think as the situation becomes more urgent, we will apply ourselves to it. I think that will be far too late for a very large number of people in poor countries, because that's who's getting killed by climate change at the moment. And that to me is a symbol of the kind of the real problem, the problem that I'm much less optimistic about, which is what on earth is humanity?
Yeah, and it's not
Are
just
humans going to wake up to the fact that we're all one at any point.
I don't know, because humans, or at least some humans, lots of humans seem to be inherently selfish. And because the business of trying to deal with climate change is handled by governments have short terms. In America, you can only be president for 2 terms. So you get 8 years of progress or not, and then somebody else takes over. And as we've seen with the current incumbent of the White House, who's actually not there very much, he seems to be golfing most of the time, he can just say, well, we're going to pull out of the Paris Accords. What's encouraging about that is that plenty of states and cities have said, we're not going to pull out of the Paris Accords, we're going to aggressively pursue it because we think it's the right thing to do. They reckon that if they can get rid of him, they'll be able to reverse that decision before it makes any difference to anything. Yeah, I think that's true. And I think that, well, if he's a one-term president, then his decision will be null and void anyway.
So this set me thinking all this. So one of the things they were talking about in the Liturgists podcast was the idea that humanity is on a journey of becoming more I don't know whether globally minded, that sounds bad, but moved from a kind of locally centered mindset where in order to survive you basically have to think about yourself as an individual and your tribe.
Yeah.
And then over time we have become like a global village, and there is more thinking at the higher level. And part of the argument is that the overview effect is part of a kind of transition for humanity to be much more aware of ourselves as a kind of shared. Well, the way they put it at one point was to stop thinking of our identity as primarily someone from a certain country or someone with certain beliefs or something like that, and then also happens to be a human and happens to live on Earth, and to sort of turn it around and think of our identity as in the more accurate way, which is primarily I am a resident of Earth, secondarily I am a human, and then thirdly I'm part of some other affiliations and beliefs that are important to me, but not as important as my humanity and my aliveness, if you see what I mean. My part of life.
Yeah.
Part of the living organism.
Interesting. I think that that's a really optimistic way of looking at it. I think that with everything that I'm going to go into my let's moan about things for a moment. But with everything that's happened in the last, say, 12 months, with the Brexit vote, Trump being president, the war in Syria that just seems to never end, other things like Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Yemen. You've got some really quite hateful, nasty stuff happening in Australia, where people are being put onto an island. Immigrants are being just basically shoved off to an island. To me, maybe it's because I tend to hear about these negative things. To me, it seems that things are getting worse, and that people are saying, no, this is mine. I want to hang on to this for as long as I can. And maybe that's because what you've been talking about is a growing movement, and that they want to hang on to it for as long as they can until that growing movement takes it away from them and says, no, we're all in this together, as David Cameron used to say. Yeah,
but that's what's so ironic about that phrase.
I know it is, isn't it?
It's so profoundly true.
Yeah,
and yet
that's not what he meant.
Had no meaning.
That's not what he meant
context
at all. What he meant was, I've got mine, and I don't care about you.
You're in this too.
Yes. You see that pit that you're in? You're in that.
You're in there, and so are all your friends. So maybe, just maybe, this kind of hate-fueled policy making is like the death throes of the old mindset. Maybe.
I would hope that is true. Because if it's not, then it's hard to see if things can get any better, really.
So I wanted to talk a little bit about my personal response to the kind of hate and fear fueled speak that has happened in the last 2 years, I guess.
Yeah,
maybe a bit longer.
Yeah,
and it was always there before, but it seems to be in the ascendancy.
Well, I think that it was always there before. I don't want to hijack what you're about to say, but
Yeah.
it was always there before. But it seems to have gone mainstream and become acceptable.
Yeah,
Yeah.
There is a feeling that there was a narrative which was not that. In fact, I was thinking about this earlier. This is taking me off track, but just before we started recording, I was just thinking about this stuff and thinking that when I grew up, even though I grew up under a government that I and my parents felt were doing a lot of wrong things and acting in the wrong ways, which was the Conservative government in the 80s in the UK, even though the government was what I felt was bad, I still had this general sense that society was basically a good thing, and then there were bad actors. There were criminals or terrorists, or possibly, other governments who did bad things. But the society I lived in, I felt basically represented good values. Didn't always live at that. Maybe it was incredibly naive. Anyway, so maybe I've just grown up now. But now, in the worst times, thinking about what's going on now, I feel like the whole society that I live in is going the wrong way, and it's not just individual actors who are doing bad things. It's the whole direction of society.
Yeah.
Towards hate and fear. Anyway, so that was a distraction, and it's probably reveals both incredible naivety when I was growing up, and also a complete wrongness about my current society, I imagine. So you should probably ignore that.
I think there's an interesting pattern emerging with the hate and fear and the mainstreaming of extreme views, stuff that wouldn't normally be acceptable in the mainstream. And that is maybe that with climate change and with rising population and food becoming more expensive, is that people are sensing that they need to grab hold of something before it's gone. Subconsciously.
I also think the ease of migration is a factor. It's not just that there's a lot of people, it's also that those people can travel relatively easily and they're aware of other places. And that means that we encounter each other a lot more than we used to, which I feel like surely in the long term must mean that we behave better, but maybe that's naive too.
I don't know.
Anyway,
yeah,
I want to get on to my point.
Yeah.
So, the thing I was thinking about today when I was listening to this podcast was that I feel like a lot of my identity and my motivations come out of the fact that I'm a Christian, and for me that forms a lot of how I view the world, in my opinion. But then I look around me and I certainly see people who are not Christians or really hate Christianity, who I feel much more affinity with when talking about almost any moral issue. And then I see Christians who I feel like come from a different planet and I have no affinity with. And I started asking myself, what do I have in common with the people I have things in common with? And my first thought was, is it love versus hate and fear? And my gut reaction is yes, it is love versus hate and fear. But surely those people that I'm calling hateful and fearful wouldn't describe themselves in that way. So how can I be a bit smarter in understanding what this affinity is that I have with the people that I feel are on the side of what is obviously good, which is caring about people in other countries, not just your own, trying to allow people the freedom to have the identity they want to have. So in terms of gender or sexuality, or in terms of race, and like not stripping people of identity that they have, and trying to give people equal access to opportunities, but then maybe no one's against those things, right? Well, some people are against some of those things.
I think you'll find that there's people in Afghanistan who are very much against a lot of those things.
So the question is, what do we have in common? Is it because the love-hate thing surely is too simplified?
A lot of it's driven by fear.
Yeah, fear is I agree.
A lot of it's
fear
driven
is a
by,
big thing.
It's a big thing. One of the things I've been struggling to understand since the Charlottesville mess is, what exactly do these white people in America have to protest about? Because they're not going to have any trouble finding a job. They're not going to have any trouble getting a pension or getting health care. They're not going to be prejudiced against by the state because they're white. Most of them are men.
Well, they may have trouble. They may have trouble finding a job or health care.
And most of them are white men. So I didn't see many white women marching in that march. So I don't really understand what they have to fear in America, because look at what's in the White House. Look at what's been in the White House for, let's take the presidency as 100%. For 99% of the time since they've been presidents, they've been white men. There's never been a white woman or a black woman who's been a president. You have a black man once, and everybody's up in arms. And
yeah, but there's a lot of people who are poor and white who haven't got a job or know they're going to have trouble getting a job, and I think that some of the fear is real. That they are kind of, they're not thought about either. They're marginalised as well. But and then that fear is turning into.
But you could guarantee in America that they will find it easier to find a job than any black man.
That may be so, but that may not be very easy.
It still may not be very easy. But the question is, again, what exactly do they have to protest about? I just don't understand it. I think if people, if anybody has a right to protest, it's black people, it's Hispanic people, it's people who are prejudiced every single day. And I know that there is the movement called Black Lives Matter, which is incredibly important. But their agenda is not so much we can't get jobs. It's more like people are shooting us. Stop shooting us. Yes. Yeah. So yeah.
So what do we have in common? Is it as simple as fear versus non-fear?
Yeah, maybe. I think it's a sense. I was going to compare Christianity to a club, in which you don't always have to like the people who are in the club with you, but they are still Christians. And yes, some Christians hold extreme views, some Muslims hold extreme views. But they're all just humans, aren't they? They're just people who hold extreme views who happen to be part of a religion. That doesn't make the religion a bad thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing for me is that, as I said, I feel like being a Christian is a really important part of shaping how I think. And then to find someone who says, yes, I have the same thing that shapes how I think, and then their thinking is an entirely different shape, is really difficult to understand.
Yeah.
That's where I'm coming from on that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'd say someone once made the point to me about left and right in politics, which might be relevant, which is that they compared the left to a sort of loving mother who looks after, who cares and nurtures. So people on the left want their society to be someone who sort of cuddles them,
Mm-hmm.
and people on the right want their society to be someone who is like a stern father.
Okay, so
who tells them what to do.
It's a patriarchal, matriarchal thing going on there.
Yeah, although I mean that in order to use the father-mother distinction, we have to buy into the male-female stereotype. So perhaps we can do better than that.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I think we probably.
So I mean, matriarchal societies are probably quite command and control orientated as well.
Yes.
So maybe we can do better than that and talk about.
Well, yes, they are command and control oriented, but they do it in such a way that you feel like you want to do something rather than you're being kicked in the head and told to do it.
But anyway, but maybe we can do better, and so that the left is like a cuddle, and the right is like a command.
Yeah. Okay.
A stern command, right? So, and that to me that makes a lot of sense. So there are Christians who see God that way, right? Who see God as primarily there to tell people what to do, and that you're like God's mouthpiece, and you have to tell people what to do for Him. And then there are Christians who see God as someone who wants to cuddle everyone.
Yeah, I'm kind of.
Which is probably closer to where I am.
I'm kind of on board with that. I mean, I'm not a Christian, but I think if you are going to, I'd rather have a God who wants to cuddle me than wants to kick me in the head and tell me what to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think I should acknowledge my own personal journey in the cuddling direction over my life as well. I think that the tradition I was brought up in was sort of in the middle, and there was a bit of sternness and a bit of cuddliness.
Okay, so you had a bit of Old Testament and a bit of New Testament.
Yeah, although actually, that's a whole other podcast about my. I love the Old Testament, but that's a whole other podcast because it's like realistic. It doesn't beat around the bush about what life's like, but that's different. But yeah, I've slid towards the cuddly end.
Okay.
Almost, I'm like off the scale now of the cuddly end.
Did you watch? Sorry, I'm just going to digress madly for a moment.
Don't take that quote out of context.
Did you watch any of The Handmaid's Tale, or indeed watch The Handmaid's Tale?
No, I would really like to, and I just somehow missed it, and now it's gone. We
should do a whole podcast about that because it's really, really good.
Oh, fantastic!
Yeah.
I'll have to get hold of it. I'd really like to.
Yeah,
watch
it's excellent.
It's written by
Margaret Atwood. Who's an amazing sci-fi writer.
Yeah.
She writes incredible dystopian, pretty bleak stuff, to be honest, but it's really well written and very believable. And it's always, well, not always, but frequently near enough to where we are that it seems credible. Yeah, so it's I'd put it in the same kind of ballpark as Children of Men, in that,
which I love.
which is brilliant as well. Yeah. Yeah, what a film! What a film that is.
Have you read the book?
No. Is it good?
Okay.
Is it worth a look?
It's amazingly good, but you need a very strong constitution.
Oh, is it tough going
to get through?
Okay.
I think it's the beginning of chapter 2 or chapter 3. There's a health warning on that.
Is
book,
there? Okay.
In my opinion, I'm giving you a health warning.
Right.
There's not actually one.
Okay.
So I feel like what we should do is talk a bit about Twin Peaks and then be done with this podcast.
So yes, the reason we started recording a bit later this evening, this won't mean anything to our listener who doesn't actually care or know when we started recording.
No, and presumably switched off some time ago.
Yeah, presumably.
Because this is not the usual thing that they talk about.
When we started talking about God, they probably switched off and started listening to The Bugle or something.
Or they switched over to the Imagined Thought Experiment podcast.
And then switched back to us.
We're like, what's this?
Okay, Twin Peaks, yes.
So it's a little bit of context. I have been watching series 1 of Twin Peaks.
Excellent.
While I went away over the summer, I watched the whole of series 1, which contains a lot less than I remembered.
It's quite thin, isn't it?
So I need to find. I mean, it was brilliant. I loved it, but I need to find series 2 because that's got a lot of the meat of what is Twin Peaks in it.
Okay, well, series 2 is available.
Yes, I know. I just need to watch
You
it.
need to watch it. It's brilliant. It's utterly brilliant.
But you said you said this evening you were watching Twin Peaks. Now, do you mean the new Twin Peaks?
No. So,
okay.
My wife hasn't seen it. She was fairly aware of it, but has never seen it. I haven't seen it since it came out I mean, I watched it
Wow.
when it first came out on broadcast
Yeah.
because I was I was just still am a huge David Lynch fan. So when I heard he was making a TV series, I was like, oh yes.
Mm-hmm.
And watching it now, it's incredible just how influential it was, how influential it still is on television and film.
Yeah.
The performances in it are just incredible. It seems to exist in a time and a place that's just slightly skewed from our own.
Yeah.
Because things aren't quite right. So we're about 3/4 of the way through season 2. So
Right.
So can we spoil? Can we do spoilers?
I think Twin Peaks is old enough. You can spoil it.
Okay, so we've got past the bit where Laura Palmer's killer has been revealed.
Right, don't tell me who, because even though I've seen it, I'm pretty sure I've forgotten.
Okay, so there's an incredible scene.
So don't do any spoilers.
I won't spoil it.
I changed my mind.
But I'll say there's an incredible scene where they are talking to the killer, and he seems to know something about Cooper, which is really creepy. And that's a really creepy scene. It's also heightened by the fact that the sprinklers in the sheriff's office go off at this time, so everything's rainy and there's lightning outside, and it's just.
I think Cooper is the most incredible character.
He is, isn't he?
His joy,
Yeah.
his joie de vivre is just amazing.
Yeah, he sees joy in everything, in the smallest things, and what is really cool about it is that the sheriff and the deputies just go along with everything that Cooper says without questioning anything.
Yeah, I really noticed that watching it again.
These really unconventional.
You had a dream, okay.
Yeah, these really unconventional detective techniques.
Yeah.
So he says, "I had a dream about a dwarf and a giant," and they're like, "Oh, okay."
Okay, what does that mean we should do today?
So series 1's got the dancing dwarf scene in it, which is just so iconic.
Yeah. Sometimes
my arms bend back. Just so iconic and so influential.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In the show notes of this podcast, we will link to the overview film. I'll try and embed it in the webpage if I can, which I think I will be able to do. We'll link to this news story about this man, which I hope is not fake.
No, it's real. I've checked it out a few times. In fact, in researching, he says, I did some research. I looked some stuff up on the internet. There was a similar story in Brazil, which obviously faces terrible deforestation as well.
And we'll link to the Liturgists podcast that I mentioned, and we'll link to Twin Peaks. There was something I was going to say about that. I've forgotten.
Well, Series 3 is on at the moment on satellite television.
Right, and then at some point we'll watch Series 3 and maybe talk about it.
Yeah, definitely. But we should definitely talk about The Handmaid's Tale.
Oh yeah.
Maybe we should do that next time.
Yeah, because I haven't seen it. We're in a window where I haven't seen it.
You haven't seen it. As far as I know, if you have a streaming service, I think it's on Amazon. If you have a streaming service, I'm going to say like Amazon, but I think it's only on Amazon. I presume at some point it will be available, and maybe it's already available on disc.
Right, yeah. I thought it was on Netflix.
Don't think so, but might be worth it.
It's on Amazon, is it? Okay. Yeah, well, I can pay for Amazon things one-off, but I'm not going to do that.
No, okay.
It's only telly.
It's only telly, isn't it? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Actually, I recommend a podcast to our listeners.
Do it.
It's called Standard Issue, and it's a feminist podcast. It says it's for all women, for women, but I listen to it because I'm a feminist and I really enjoy it. It's a lot of fun. It does speak about sort of issues that women face, but also they talk about stuff that I think is universal to everybody in terms of getting on in life and equality and politics and sport and things like that. It's really good. Definitely worth a listen.
Cool.
Sarah Millican occasionally appears on it.
Oh yeah.
Who else? Who else have I heard on it? Lisa Tarbuck. Yeah, it's very good.
Cool.
Yeah. Plug?
Cool. Shall I plug? Yeah. I made an Android game called Rabbit Escape. The free version on Google Play Store has had 205 downloads. Count them. I feel like it ought to have more downloads than that because it's all right. The people who've played it quite like it.
They need to tell their friends. Tell all their friends.
Yeah, and it's free, so you don't have to register your credit card. Also, I've got a blog and some YouTube videos about programming and stuff.
Sweet.
That's it.
That was a tired plug. That was
just buy my game.
done some stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to do some plugging now. I present a film and music radio show on Glastonbury FM 107.1 in the Glastonbury Street and Wells area of Somerset. I'll just let that one hang tonight. Let it hang.
It's, I still, in my mind's eye, that's like 100 metres of High Street.
So it's on at 6 p.m. on a Thursday.
You have to stand within earshot of the studio to be able to pick up the signal.
Yeah, you do. In fact, on some days when the window's open, you can hear me very clearly. It's on between 6 and 7 on a Thursday.
Oh!
Yes.
I've remembered what I was going to say. Go on, you do your bit, and then we'll end on this really high note.
Because me plugging is not a high note.
Not high enough.
We're going to... I have to get higher in pitch as we go along. It's on between 6 and 7 on a Thursday, repeated between 2 and 3 on a Friday. It's movie reviews, music, DVD picks, local cinema listings, movies on TV, any other nonsense that I want to talk about. It's not just stuff that's on at cinemas. I'd watch home release stuff. So, it's a movie show for people who maybe don't get out to the movies as much as they'd like to. Yeah.
And there's a Facebook page. There's a little community around.
There is actually, yeah.
You should become part of that community.
Yes, listener.
And if you are our regular listener, you will know that we like a bit of Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Oh, yes, we do.
And in our show notes, the reason why I got into this, the show notes thing was, I also will provide a link to Arnold Schwarzenegger asking you to terminate hate and basically explaining in simple and completely correct terms why all of this hate and fear is wrong and what we should do instead, in a way that I found incredibly inspiring. Like, I've always seen Arnold Schwarzenegger as a hilarious joke figure. And then I saw his governorship as like
a joke,
confusing, but essentially he's just another right winger.
Yeah.
But this little video he made, that's about 4 minutes long, is absolutely on the nose correct.
And this isn't the first thing he's done either.
And inspiring.
He did a video on climate change, in which he said, "I don't care if you don't believe in climate change. This is what's going to happen." He did one about election, what he calls gerrymandering, which is I'm not even sure what it means, but he's quite hot under the collar about it. I think he's more effective as an activist. What just fell on the floor?
Right. Sorry. Just a little thing I was fiddling with.
He's more effective as a political activist and getting the message of something out there than he was a waste of time being governor of California.
Right. I don't really know what he did as governor. I know he was on the left of the Republican Party.
Yeah, he is on the left of the Republican Party, and he's still a Republican. He's just not a nut job.
Well, they need some sane people.
They do.
The world needs some sane people. We need some reasonable people on the left.
Yep.
And the right.
Yep.
And in the centre.
Mm-hmm. No, I don't really care.
I don't
really care about the centre.
Could someone listening, And there's only you.
Yeah, only you, listener. If you're still listening.
Please stand for Parliament and become Prime Minister. Thank you.
Mm. Is that it?
That's it.
Okay.
See you next time. I appreciate if you're too busy campaigning, you won't be listening. By the way, if you listen to this programme, please let us know in any way. There's some number of hundreds of unique listens every month, and yet I suspect that that's some kind of statistical anomaly and it's just robots downloading it or something. So if you actually listen to one of our podcasts, please let us know.
Yeah.
You can do that on the blog or Twitter or whatever you like. Facebook. Well, you can Facebook
me.
Andy C.
You can Facebook me at my Facebook website, which is Andy's Movie Mashup. So yeah, if you listen.
By the way, if you use Facebook, you're supporting all of this bad stuff we talked about. So don't.
Oh, that's me told.
Yeah.
Yeah. I only use it for that these days because I grew tired of it. I'm a bit of a Twitter convert these days.
Yeah, I use Twitter, which also supports evil. And I use Mastodon,
which doesn't.
Which is at least free from monopoly control. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
Obviously, bad things can happen in distributed systems as well. It happens that the Mastodon community is pretty positive and friendly to people of all different persuasions.
I've taken just lately in the last few days, when I see a righteous post of somebody posting something really good, and then somebody just posts a straw man troll, I've taken to answering their straw man troll with a picture of a troll. Just so everybody's clear about what's happening there. And just not even doing another straw man answer to their straw man, because I just can't be asked.
Fight the good fight.
It's just like yelling into the void.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All that.
Yep.
Cool.
Okay.
Thanks, listener, for putting up with us.
Thank you very much.
Normal service will resume.
Goodbye.